Exposed my cheating wife, then took her money. I never expected my marriage would fall apart after 22 years. My wife and I are both 49 years old. I work as a project manager for an industrial equipment company, and my wife is an event coordinator for a hotel chain. We met at a dog shelter where we both volunteered on weekends. That was 25 years ago when we were young and optimistic. Our kids are finishing college. My son studies marine biology and my daughter is majoring in journalism. The first signs appeared about 18 months ago. My wife started coming home from work with news stories about clients and coworkers. Names like Alex and Jordan suddenly peppered her conversations. These new friends apparently loved going out for drinks after successful events. I didn't think much of it at first. People make new work friends all the time. Then I noticed a perfume, something expensive she has never worn. She started leaving earlier for work and coming home later, always with a perfectly reasonable explanation about event setups or client meetings. Her phone became a constant companion, always within reach, always commanding her attention during times we used to spend talking. Remember, I always say, just pay attention. That's all you have to do. Weekends became filled with emergency client situations and venue inspections that hadn't been necessary in her 15 previous years in the same job. One evening, I reached for her phone to check the weather while mine was charging. She practically lunged across the couch to grab it before I could touch it. "Sorry," she said, "I've got confidential client information on there." In 22 years of marriage, she never once mentioned confidential client information. Well, if that isn't a sign, I don't know what is. I started noticing other changes too. New clothes appeared in her closet, not just work attire, but items I never saw her wear at home. Our joint account had unexplained expenses at department stores and boutiques far beyond her usual spending habits. Her mileage on the car increased dramatically, an extra 300 miles each week that couldn't be explained by her normal commute. She began mentioning work dinners with clients that ran late into the evening. The credit card statement showed these dinners often happened at upscale restaurants. When I asked about these places casually, she'd give vague answers about whatever the client chose, without specific details. Then there was a night she came home with a different perfume scent entirely, not the one she'd been wearing, but something else. I noticed, but didn't say anything. My father always told me to gather facts before jumping to conclusions. Absolutely. Too many people want to be accusatory without any proof. So I started paying attention, not in an obsessive way, just noting inconsistencies and strange behaviors. The final straw came when I overheard her on the phone in our garage late one night. "I miss you too," she whispered. "Yes, this weekend should work. He thinks I'm going to the conference in Cleveland." I wasn't sure what conference she was referring to, but she never told me about an upcoming conference. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed time to process what I'd heard and plan my next steps carefully. I'm methodical by nature. It's what makes me good at my job. I applied that same methodical approach to understanding what was happening in my marriage. First, I verified there was no hotel industry conference in Cleveland that weekend. A simple internet search confirmed my suspicion. Nothing was scheduled. I created a secure document on my personal laptop where I began noting dates, times, and inconsistencies. Every suspicious event got recorded, not out of obsession, but from a need to understand the full picture. I didn't install spyware or hack into her accounts. I simply paid attention to what was in plain sight. Her suitcase for the Cleveland conference contained evening wear and lingerie. What did she need lingerie for? Not typical conference attire by any measure. I noted the date she was supposedly leaving and the hotel name she mentioned on a phone call. Instead of confronting her, I decided to see where this would lead. The morning she left for Cleveland, I checked our location sharing app that we'd set up a long time ago for safety. She'd forgotten to disable it. The app showed she was heading south, not east toward Cleveland. I took screenshots of the location data, adding them to my growing file. I contacted our family attorney, under the guise of updating our wills. During the appointment, I casually asked about divorce proceedings in our state and what documentation might be necessary if infidelity was involved. The attorney explained that while we live in a no-fault divorce state, evidence of infidelity could potentially impact financial settlements and property division in Ohio if properly documented. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to obtain definitive proof. The weekend of our Cleveland conference, I followed the location data to a resort 2 hours south. I didn't cause a scene or confront anyone. I simply documented her car in the parking lot with photographs showing the location and timestamp. Not every man will be this calm. If you're going through something similar, try to keep a level head and think. Through the restaurant window at the hotel, I saw my wife dining with another man. They were holding hands across the table, clearly more than colleagues. I took photos from a distance, capturing what I needed without drawing attention. Before leaving, I noted the man's vehicle and his license plate number. I took down his license plate number for general purpose, but he pulled up in a white Cadillac Escalade. With each piece of evidence I collected, my marriage crumbled a little more in my mind. This wasn't just one mistake or a brief lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, ongoing deception that had been happening for months. I continued gathering evidence for 3 more weeks, building a strong case. I transferred some of our joint savings to my personal account. Not everything, just enough to sustain me through whatever came next. I consulted with a different attorney, one specializing in divorce cases, and laid out everything I discovered. The attorney advised me on the best approach given our state laws and the nature of the evidence. By the time I was ready to confront my wife, I had a comprehensive file documenting months of deception. I also had a clear understanding of our financial situation and the legal strategies available to me. During this time, I discovered something else that would prove crucial. For years, I had been quietly investing in cryptocurrency and tech stocks. What had started as a modest side investment with my inheritance money had grown significantly. I confirmed with my attorney that these investments, made with separate property funds that never entered our joint accounts, would remain mine in a divorce. I wasn't acting out of pure emotion. This was a strategic response to betrayal. I chose a Thursday evening to face the truth of my marriage. My wife had sent a text that she would be working late at a client dinner, but according to our location sharing app, she was at a hotel, the same hotel where she met her AP before. I sent her a brief message. "We need to talk when you get home. It's important. Nothing more, nothing less." She called almost immediately, her voice carrying that slight edge of defensiveness. She claimed to be at a dinner with clients discussing a wedding venue. I simply repeated that we needed to talk when she returned and ended the call. While waiting, I sat in the darkness of our living room, evidence folder beside me, mentally rehearsing what needed to be said, not in anger, but with clarity and purpose. The evidence I'd collected over months painted an unmistakable picture. Locations that contradicted her stories, photographs from the resort weekend, financial records showing patterns of deception. She arrived home remarkably quick for someone supposedly at a business dinner 30 minutes after my call. The house remained dimmed as she entered, just a single lamp illuminating where I sat. Her expression shifted from practiced casualness to wariness when she saw me. I didn't rise to greet her or invite her to sit. I didn't need to create a formal setting for this moment. It wasn't a negotiation or discussion. It was the end. Without preamble, I showed her the evidence on my phone, location data contradicting her stories, photographs from my visit to places she claimed not to be, the image of her with her AP at the resort. Her face told the story her words couldn't. Shock that I knew, then recognition that there was no way to talk herself out of this situation. Her attempts at explanation followed the predictable pattern. First denial, then minimizing, then blame shifting. The affair wasn't what I thought. Then it didn't mean anything. Then somehow I had driven her to it by being emotionally distant. I listened without interruption, without reaction. Each justification only confirmed what I already knew. This marriage was beyond saving. When she finished, I simply stated that I wanted a divorce. I had already consulted an attorney and understood my rights. I had secured an apartment and would be moving out the following day. The conversation then shifted, as I knew it would, to financial concerns. This was a moment I prepared for meticulously. I presented the documentation of our assets and investments, highlighting the crucial detail: my separate property investments made with inheritance money that had grown to over $450,000. All I'm going to say is he is damn lucky he didn't commingle those funds with their accounts. Smart move. Money that would remain mine in the divorce. I explained that she could keep the house, but my investment accounts were legally protected as separate property. I showed her the documentation proving these investments originated from my inheritance and had never mingled with our joint finances. The shock on her face spoke volumes. She had never known the extent of these investments, nor anticipated losing access to them. Her threats to fight me in court fell flat against my careful preparation. I had consulted multiple attorneys who confirmed my position. Fighting would cost her more than she stood to gain. I left the evidence with her and went upstairs to our bedroom. The door locked behind me offered the first moment of true privacy I'd felt in months. Through the door, I could hear her movements, crying, then a phone conversation, likely seeking someone to validate her version of events. I spent those hours packing essentials while mentally separating myself from the life we'd built. By morning, I had distilled 22 years down to 2 suitcases and a briefcase of important documents. When I carried my bags to the car at dawn, I felt nothing but a strange lightness, no anger, no regret, just a certainty that comes with making a necessary decision and following through. The chapter was closing, but my story would continue without her. The weeks following my departure unfolded with predictable legal maneuvers from both sides. My wife hired an aggressive attorney who immediately demanded half of my investment portfolio. Her initial shock had transformed into indignation, as if I had somehow wronged her by protecting my finances while she betrayed our marriage. My attorney responded with methodical precision, presenting documentation proving the funds used for investments originated from my inheritance and remained separate property throughout our marriage. Every transaction had been carefully recorded, every dollar accounted for in a way that established clear separation from marital assets. During this time, my wife launched what can only be described as a campaign to salvage her reputation. Messages circulated among our social circle portraying me as cold and calculating, claiming I had abandoned her without warning. Several mutual friends contacted me, concerned about her version of events. I simply showed them selected evidence without commentary. The facts spoke for themselves, and the accusations gradually subsided. Our children presented a more complicated challenge. My daughter called me in tears after my wife had given her a heavily edited version of our separation. My son simply stopped communicating altogether. I invited them both to my new apartment, where I presented just enough evidence to establish the truth without unnecessary details that would further damage their relationship with their mother. I emphasized that despite everything, she would always be their mother and I would always be their father. We were not asking them to choose sides. The divorce proceedings stretched over 3 months, with depositions, financial disclosures, and legal posturing from both attorneys. Throughout this process, I maintained detailed records of all communications and followed my attorney's guidance precisely. The investment portfolio, which had grown to over $450,000, became the central point of contention. The turning point came during the financial discovery phase. My attorney uncovered evidence that my wife had been diverting funds from our joint account to a personal savings account for months before I discovered her affair. This revelation, combined with the documented infidelity, shifted the judge's perspective significantly. When the final judgment came down, it exceeded even my attorney's expectations. Not only did the court award me full ownership of my investment portfolio as separate property, but the judge also ordered my wife to pay me $1,500 monthly in alimony for 3 years. The judge cited my wife's deceptive financial behavior and the economic advantage she gained from my supporting her career development during our marriage. The house was sold, with proceeds split equally as I had originally proposed. She kept her retirement accounts and I kept mine. But the investment portfolio and alimony represented a significant financial consequence she never anticipated. When the divorce was finalized, I felt no triumph or satisfaction, just a quiet relief that comes with closing a painful chapter. 6 months later, I purchased a modest condominium in a different neighborhood and continued working my regular job. The investments continued to grow, along with monthly alimony payments, providing financial security I hadn't expected at this stage of life. My ex-wife struggled with the financial aftermath. She downsized to a small apartment and took on additional projects for extra income. The man she had sacrificed our marriage for disappeared shortly after our confrontation. Apparently, his interest diminished once she no longer had access to the lifestyle our marriage had provided. She attempted reconciliation through text messages and emails on several occasions. I never responded. Some mutual friends chose sides, as people inevitably do. I lost a few, but retained those who valued truth and integrity. My relationship with our children gradually healed. Initially distant and confused, they eventually came to understand the situation without me needing to vilify their mother. They visit regularly now and have adjusted to our new family structure. 1 year after the divorce, I received a formal letter from my ex-wife's attorney requesting modification of the alimony arrangement. My attorney responded with a single-page letter referencing the binding nature of our final divorce decree. The request was denied. 2 years later, life has found a new equilibrium. I date occasionally, but remain cautious about serious relationships. The experience taught me to trust my instincts, maintain clear boundaries, and protect myself first. People sometimes ask if I regret taking such a firm stance on the financial settlement. I don't. My ex-wife made deliberate choices over months, believing there would be no significant consequences. I simply ensured that wasn't the case. I didn't seek revenge or public humiliation. I just made certain I wouldn't suffer financially for her betrayal. That's not revenge, it's justice. This man was lucky, although I thought the alimony should have been longer, more than 3 years given how long they were married, but I think the judge took into account the investments he had. But at the same time, men rarely get alimony.